Boa tarde.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Marcio Albuquerque. I'm the coordinator of this afternoon panel, and we are organizing along with Uninove. We will be talking about the discontinuity with the public organs, public bodies here in Brazil. We will have 4 panelists and 2 moderators. We will have Rossana Pavanelli, who is from FGV. We also have Janaina as a moderator. She is a leader entrepreneur. We also have here with us Marcia, who is another moderator and manager who has worked with me for such a long time, and he is also expert in knowledge. And we have here Henrique, a case of success of ANAC, Professor Luciano, Meira, who will talk about the building leadership. And we also have Professor João Neves, who is from Fluminense University. And we will talk about this unbalance and requirements that makes us effectively lose the timing of the public organizations. So for us not to waste time, Pavanelli is going to be our first panelist. Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon. Well, above all, I would like to thank for the invitation for the SBGC and all the professionals, or renowned professionals in the sector. I would like to start talking about the challenges regarding the public management and obviously competency management. So I have prepared a material here. I'm sharing here with you, and the idea is to provide it for the coordinator. So what is the concept of competitiveness according to this scenario for the public sector? Well, according to my own experiences, I have been working for 20 years for federal public organs. So the concept is sorted according to factors, economists, and others who have emerged according to the Schumpeter. And he says that innovation, and obviously this concept of competitiveness, well, we have strategies for and other, because it makes the diversification and the innovation as an element for competitiveness. So then the organization will be able to act in a better way. And for the private sector, that is a survival. For instance, once we evaluate the most valuable brands, here we have the companies, the most renowned companies, Coca-Cola, Google. Today there is an inversion of these companies. And these were all traditional, and today we have such a combination of the companies. So why is it a value brand? Well, because it's renowned on the segment and they have been evaluated, and it's also about the profitability and operational. Well, some weeks ago, as we know, Mercado Libre is the most valuable company in Latin America, and even considering the pandemic, the Industry 4.0, the delivery concept made the company to highlight itself and to be more evaluated. And once we talk about countries, competitiveness also extend through nations. Well, today we have investments that will be for the economy. So we have several institutions and the Global Forum for Economy and other renowned institutions that bring countries that are more attractive, more appealing once it's about external investment. And we also have studies that show the competitiveness versus the wealth of a country. Well, Brazil has a competitiveness and inclusive growth lab report. This is a very good position. Once we talk about competitiveness, we also are talking about nations. So there is a relation from OST in which it shows the countries that can develop and retain talents. Because the more we have this kind of discussion, which is very important for the Industry 4.0 and all the processes, the routine processes that can be automatized, well, there will be a space to develop human knowledge. And that is according to skills, creativity, because we are all focusing on this concept. So I think it's very interesting to provide you another competitiveness concept from Wikipedia. It's 4.0. People share in a voluntary way. So according to Wikipedia, the capacity of an organization to be able to have its mission more successful than other organizations, well, it is to be able to satisfy the needs and expectations of customers or citizens. Here in Brazil, there is such a resistance from the public sector to accept that citizens, they are customers. Because, well, citizens, they pay for taxes. So that's why they have to be seen as customers and also organizations. Well, and besides that, it has to be based on the capacity to satisfy the needs. Well, that is customers, citizens, and if profitability is inferior to their competitors, well, we have that for the public sector. Because if the cost of the public machine is low, then we will have problems in the future, as we have seen according to the expenses for the management. So there is a competitiveness in the public sector, and it is linked to the efficiency, operational, and sustainability of the management, the public management. Well, I have here as a background a model, well, more than 20 years of consultancy, I have been using this structure towards quality. Here we have MAG 2020, the 8 foundations, and transforming leadership, sustainable development, transforming leadership, value generation. Well, zone it, as you can see here, it's all about the organizational learning and innovation. And the organizational learning is according to the knowledge. Because once we talk about competitiveness in the public sector, according to my own experience, we have the main challenges. For instance, as main challenges, well, according to my point of view, is a low focus on operational efficiency. The lack of competitive parameters in which you can have a comparison from one sector, one body, one minister with other bodies, for me, is one of the biggest challenges that we have and that has to be solved. Another point is best practices that are not widely shared. It's very redundant and they are decentralized hard access. It's not about financial systems for public management, but that is according to the knowledge management and the lessons learned. For instance, a consultancy company that was hired, okay, they have specifications, the customer has specifications that are well-defined scope, but certainly part of the consultancy service could be shared with other departments of with other areas. So there is this difference because there is a lot of information and the access to information. Well, it's a machine, it's about bureaucracy, innovation as an element, a very important element, extremely important to have this competitiveness action. Innovation is not only disruptive that I mentioned about Schumpeter in terms of the concept. Innovation is about, well, providing additional information processes, business models, management models, laws, legislation. Well, there is the whole public budget and the excess of barriers, the hiring process, the changing process, the roles. Well, sometimes it all, this kind of protection makes it difficult to adopt lighter options, innovative options. So then you would do the same, but in a simpler way by optimizing using resources in the public service, because this is very different in the public service.
Major challenges to deal with discontinuity. In my point of view, there are two big ways discontinuity happens. First one is because the new managers do not understand, can't have access what was happened before in that organization within the country. And there is also a very natural matter, which is the change of managerial profile. When there is a program, suppose it was an A program, and now it's called B program because of any kind of validation, which is underlying any management. This A to B change is all only the name change, but the essence is preserved. This is a good scenario, but the worst scenario is when everything is in the garbage can. When nothing is preserved, the learning curve is not used. So this is a very bad scenario. So as a consultant, I could see, I could be in a project and I asked about the previous consulting people who organized a previous management there. So the lack of interest of the material generated for previous governments is something very odd for me, because we need to we need to use what was done before. This for I think this way because I have worked in the private sector before, and the factor number 5, which is very critical and it can justify the other, is the society lack of participation in public management.
Do processo de tomada de decisão, do processo de prestação de contas do governo, do processo de prestação de contas públicas. E isso traz uma fragilidade muito grande ao sistema. Vejam bem, aqui eu não estou defendendo uma bandeira A, uma bandeira B, um partido X ou um partido Y. A minha fala é totalmente imparcial e técnica. A sociedade participar é excelente e isso precisa ser incentivado. A publicidade dos atos, inclusive, talvez seja uma garantia.
Maybe it's another guarantee if we can talk about it. Well, and to finish my participation in this panel, I would like to bring some possible, well, I'm not going to say solutions, but reflections for you. So, as for the lack of articulation, we should have clearer criteria for the performance evaluation according to the comparison of departments, establish indicators and numbers, and I have participated in a modernization process for private companies in 2010. So we have other organizations that have other indicators. But it's a comparison. It is a comparison. Once we have the excellence and we can compare performance indicators. The second is about challenges and more integrated system, more integrated information system for financial, budgeting, information structured upon the knowledge management and errors to be avoided. Well, we need to have the access, the suitable access to it, because in order to access a quality information and categorize it, we need to have decision-making processes. Well, as for the renovation strategy, well, we need to have the renovation of it, because once we talk about private sector, well, it's about economy, they are seeking for a strategy, they are analyzing the market, they are trying to implement their products and channels, so that has to be in parallel with other channels, and reinforcement with the public bodies. And the fourth is the continuity. It doesn't matter if it's right or left wing, but it is something that has to be taken into account. It doesn't matter if it's the former president, current president. Well, the more public the information is, the more the people will be gathered and we will be able to guarantee continuity. And to have more transparency and the participation of the society by using intelligence and integrated feedback. I'd like to mention about something about the 4.0 industry and artificial intelligence. Well, by having an open channel with society. In the Estado de São Paulo, Tampa Criativa program, Ana Carla, well, this program was showing challenges for the population. And for instance, a citizen asked for a sponsorship for their hobbies, and this person developed an app. So the society has to participate. It's an open channel for the society. But how can we amplify that? Well, we need to have the society to help us in the management. So I have been rushing here because it's only 15 minutes, but this is my message. It's according to my experiences and what I was able to provide according to the best private practices. And a huge challenge according to the Brazilian society, Marcio, maybe I was not aware about the lack of the knowledge management and how the public management is very fragile of well, its insufficiency. So for me to have this, well, to be able to participate in this panel, it's very productive. And today it's very clear because if we do not have a good management, if we don't have the comparison of indicators, if we do not share good practices, then
so that society and the technicians can have the continuity. Then, as a Brazilian citizen that work with many countries, I appreciate participating here, and I would like to invite you all. We have a different project. We have a qualified mentorship inside the private sector with organizations. It's a constructive project and very innovative one. And if you are interested, please get in touch with me. Thank you so much. Thank you. You reinforced how KM is important as a competitive differential. So now we are going to talk to Professor Luciano Meira. He's going to talk about leadership and how to create leadership and how it's important to have leadership.
Obrigado.
Professor, please. Thank you so much. I appreciate the invitation to be on this panel with people that are very capacitated and have a clear view of this, of our thing. So I want to talk about the human being inside knowledge management. I like to have the development of humanized leaders, and this is very important in the knowledge management field. So I'm going to share my presentation so that we can have a brief reflection, because in 15 minutes I have to be brief, I can't say much. So I changed a little bit my slides in the title, which is leadership, lack of leadership in public organizations. And I am going to explain what is this, a plain leadership. So what's happening to leadership in the world? The new normal regarding leadership, it can be essentially strategic. It's going to be strategic, but in the center of leadership is the human being factor. With this image, I would like to illustrate, because this image worth more than many words. The strategic leadership is focused since the Industrial Revolution, and so far and been vertical, control-centered, and have been personalized according to the competences have been developed. And the private sector, we see this on the 3-month analysis of the work, and this is very deficient. And the whole organization only think in short-term matter, and they have to think on their potential in a higher reach. The humanized leadership, which is happening now because of pressures that we cannot control the causes why there is this pressure. There is a complexity in natural and social life on planet Earth, and we have to rethink the leadership. There are these 4 characteristics: more horizontal. We do not have the hierarchy being something very stiff. Everyone's protagonism in a whole development, not only specific technical competencies, and sustainable results. So in order to explain what I call a plain leadership, a full leadership, not only in managerial way in general. So an American philosopher, which is Wilbur, and he has a holistic approach, holistic view. It is simple but very deep, and we can analyze a lot through it. So we see subjectivity on the left, objectivity on the right, on the top quadrants, the me, psychic one and comportamental one, and the collective on the bottom, us cultural, us social. On this matrix, when I think on leadership and a full leadership, it is very important to ask 4 questions. How do the players feel? How do the civil servants feel? So I have been studying the learning topic, and neuroscience proves that an individual learns depending on how he or she feels. It is connected to emotions, to our emotions. So if a leader can't answer this question and create a nice atmosphere in their work, they will not have a favorable environment so that the people can learn. So the second question on the top, on the right, how much each civil servant is being involved, not only about these competences, his or her competences, but on the whole. The human being has to be trained for the person as a whole, not only in particular competencies. So this ends up spilling in the person's whole life, and there are on the bottom two important questions. The shared and exemplified purposes and values have to be clear. And finally, systems and processes have to be aligned, purpose and values. When these 4 aspects are aligned with the leadership, then we have a whole leadership, a whole view, a holistic view. This has to happen not only on public service, but in the society as a whole. So in managerial terms, the management has to be engaged with well-being of the participants. And the human development management has to aim protagonist. And then on the bottom, culture management for integration and systemic management for productivity. So the ones on the top, the leaders have to be advanced in the human being level. The leader has been prepared to deal with processes, strategies, business, results, the continuous search for results. The more time goes by, the leaders have to be prepared to deal with people. And what is beneath a person's motivation, their potentialities in middle term and long term, and all of these, psychology, neuroscience, And anthropology, sociology, they are very pertinent for this point of view. Our leaders have to be well prepared to work on these four quadrants. So I'm going to have a journey on them to talk about some aspects which are very important, and then my presentation will be over. The engagement management, aiming well-being, there are two aspects. The first one is our environment. This acronym, it has been overusing, but it is relevant, which is VUCA world, volatile, uncertain, complex, ambiguous world. We have been living a situation that has been aggravating how people feel. The quadrant on the top on the left is how people feel. With this VUCA world, people are not feeling very well. So how they feel in their homes are projected on the organizations depending on how the management is managing people. So there's a book that was published a year ago, which is Morrendo por um Salário, Professor Stafford. He comes from Stanford University. He has researched the management practices in the modern era and how they are bad for the human health and also the financial health in the corporations. The cost is very high. The burnout syndrome is proof of that. The person gets completely burned, physical and mentally, and it has a problem with people and organizations also. It is an extreme stress. The individual gets completely stressed and becomes cynical, uninterested for the work and for the company, and there's no efficacy. So talking about it, what is the neuroscience can say about the practices in the environment work? How can we avoid the burnout, the chronic stress? How can the individual feel better? Imaging scans show that emotional pain has the same set as a physical pain. Individuals that are suffering with psychosomatic things, they are not exaggerating. When I was youth, they used to say that the people were spoiled. This is why they felt this way. But this is not true. This is something that really exists in our nervous system. There is a movement nowadays, especially nowadays, which has the Neuro Leadership Center. And the scientists studying that, they were able to show that the SCARF model is very important. It means status in the humanized management. We have to prevent this burnout happening so much. So S stands for status, how people feel with each other, how my importance in the environment is relevant. This is very relevant for my brain. So in cerebral amygdala can be overwhelmed depending on how the individual feels in the organization. If the person is not feeling well in an environment, the person is not going to have a good efficiency. The certainty is what C stands for. Nowadays, world is an uncertain world, but how we manage our environment can get that better. We can create action plans, people's development with more certainty. Autonomy, which stands for A. People can control their work, what to do, how to do, and who they're doing with. And the people will get engaged in this environment. And relatedness, which is R, am I secure with these relationships? And fairness. It is more than proved that our experiences of privilege can destroy people's engagement and psychosomatically. On the other side, I want to show the development management. Development is more than engagement. If I have well-being with the organization and the objectives, development is a continuous development process. The subjects are protagonists and they have plans. They have legacy on an organization. Positive psychology has been contributing a lot about management, knowledge management. So there are forma, which is a nice life, fulfillment life, engagement life, significative life, and relationship life. To be cleared, there is some explanations. When the individual has more positive emotions, when he has some objectives concreted, realized, fulfilled, better yet, when the individual has affinity with their daily chores, if they have personal strengths aligned with their work is very good, and a strong existential sense, and to live very easily with important people. This is the new well-being theory, which the positive psychology has presented. And it has helping us to create leaders and to create stimuli in the working environment. We need to help a lot, to teach a lot to leaders. When we find leaders in leadership, in human leadership that are actively engaged, so the person is very excited with the mission of organization. At work, I understand what I'm being expected. People share my values, and last, I get the chance to use my strengths every day at work. And finally, there's one more. My co-workers support me. I know I'll be recognized and acknowledged for my good work. I am confident in the future of my organization. And at my work, I'm always growing up. I can have time to talk about the bottom quadrants, but there's no problem. My focus were the quadrants on the top, which is individual management in this process. The leadership that recognizes, and I'm going to finish talking about it, it is focused on a personalization, on a personalized leadership. This is vital. If my leadership is the same with all of us, I'm going back to the past. If I consider everyone as an individual, and we can develop differential competencies in the workplace, and this is going to have a great gain. And this is the future. This is the leadership future. Then the human being is recognized as being in the center. And in Caminhos, Vida Integral, we say that people's development is the greatest result and most important one in the leadership area. The more organizational results, the more goals fulfilled, economically speaking also, they have to be natural consequences of a leadership focused in the human development. Maybe we can move forward, and it's up to you again.
Okay, thank you so much, Professor. It was quite important that you brought your ideas, so then the public organizations will be able to effectively understand people and human beings in this construction process, in this building process, according to knowledge. Now we will have Professor João Neves, who has a very difficult aspect for the public management and also according to the knowledge management. Professor, please. Thank you, Marcio. I'm going to share with you my screen.
Vou apresentar aqui. Vamos falar sobre essa descontinuidade, né, que existe.
We will talk about the discontinuation that exists within organizations, public organizations. But before that, I would like to talk about what exists.
Estou aqui meio que enrolado, mas...
Okay, hold on a second.
Porque eu não sei se... Eu estou compartilhando a tela com vocês direitinho?
Am I sharing the screen? Is it okay?
É a primeira vez que eu estou usando o Zoom.
It's the first time that I'm using Zoom. This is the challenge. I am a public employee for 44 years, so we are changing the way we are acting. Okay, so I will talk about discontinuation. Well, in this point, I think that we need to talk that can be not only in the public management, but also in the private. And what is the effect of it? Because many times the change in the private management, we need to see the context of it. And we are very attached to theories. So once we see the change, we have theory E and theory O. So what is that? Well, it's about the context of the public organization. So it is an external environment and an internal environment. But what is this theory? Well, once I am in a private organization, I have two pathways for the change. One is for the economic value, and I need to aggregate to have a new value for the organization. So I need to make this change to be implemented somehow. And it's also linked to the structure. And it's a top-down change in which it's well-planned and pragmatic. On the other hand, if it's about the theory O, if I would like to have a change based on the organization and based on the human capacity, so this change has another type of focus. It's not only about the focus of the structure, but it's about the cultural basis. And this change is called a bottom-up. And it is among people within a company. And people use it not as something that is planned. It's an emerging change that happens. So it depends on consultants. And it's quite different from the theory E. Of course, there is a whole theory behind that, but these are the main ones, the microbeer. So, once we take into account a public body, well, there is another type of context, and maybe the financial part of it is not only for the organizational change, but we need to see what are the factors in the external environment, and it's going to provoke the discontinuation and the convenience of it. But are we really able to do any change? What if there is any critical occurrence, crisis? So it's very influentiated according to this issue. And the structure characteristics, the existing time, the size of it, it also influentiates in the change, because it's not simple to change a big structure. So the management of change for this type of organization, well, they are more complex, and the next will be influentiated in the answer and the resistance to change that are all linked to it. So the first question is,
essa tal de política pública,
how can you define public policy? Well, it's not simple. It's not about only defining. There are a lot of definitions and approach. But there are two components. There is the technical part to have that structural change for the public policy,
político,
but also for the
dessa mudança na política
political part of it.
Então isso aí é muito, assim.
So this is, it has a huge impact for the political change. But what are the public policies? Well, that can be services, but I also have to direct parts of it, parts of services. For instance, I might have a specific policy to attend that specific demand. So it is a public policy. I might have rules, for instance, regulation, laws, but also constitutions. I will be able to define the role of each. And in case of the education, I have the superior, federal, state level, and also the municipality level. So these are the other types of policies. So what is the problem of the discontinuation? Well, the discontinuation is that we live in a scenario of polarization. So as for the public change, the population influences because, it depends on elections. So that is the reality. Or the influence according to the population demand before elections. And that can be captured. Another important issue is that any place in the world, those who occupy the power to electors, what if they lose the election? So on the other hand, we have the politicians that they might not change the policy. And things might be okay. However, that's not a reality. Because the policy might not occur, even though once there is a public agent who wins the election and says that it's going to do anything to change, but does not change. So this is what we see here in Brazil. That is not considered a crime. It's more about ethics. And for the other side?
On the other hand, I can have discontinuity when the public servant, which is re-elected to keep a public policy and ends up changing the policy which he was re-elected for.
Agir aí o profissional, né? Aquele que trabalha com a gestão do conhecimento, o que ele pode fazer? Né? Eu acredito o seguinte, algumas questões podem ser utilizadas nesse momento. Por exemplo, né, a questão do benchmarking. Né,
For instance, the benchmarking. For me to be able to share the practices that will be implemented for the public policy. So then I will be able to show how it is conducted, the results, the trends of it that will lead to a good performance. So it's about a sensibilization of it, not to have this change. But this is not a guarantee, but you need to show that you have conditions to keep that policy, and we might have a discontinued policy or a state policy, and you can have the continuity in that in another level. And another thing is that, well, we need to know who knows how to do things, and sharing knowledge with others or other public employees. And many public organizations, they have a corporate universities
that are hidden in these corporate universities and these units in these big public organizations, in which they are shared their knowledge. It's when I have access to the portals, the knowledge portals, I can access different practices and different actions that I can develop in other organizations. And last but not least, I would like to talk about the communities of practices, because they are groups of people who are connected, spontaneous and informally. And they also can be adapted to change. Even if there is discontinuity in the policies, there is a body of people, people with competences. They can be shared. And that ends up being done informally. So people don't need authorization. People can get together with other people and share this knowledge base. So I believe KM can favor discontinuity, because personal knowledge is not going to occupy space. You can have information, you can have knowledge, and this personal knowledge is the person's, and the person can use it in any situation. And last, so that I can wrap up, so that we can interact later, I would like to talk about Thomas More quotation, which was an English politician in the Henry VIII court. And when he was contrary to public policies from Henry VIII, he didn't change his idea. He kept this position in defending what he believed in. And he ended up being killed by Henry VIII. He was decapitated, and he ended up being a martyr for the Catholic Church. And he kept his belief. He didn't give up his beliefs. And this is very, very important. We need to believe, not only have the knowledge, but have our hearts on what we are doing. So I end here, and I can discuss anything else you would like to. Thank you so much for inviting me. Thank you, Professor. The sequence of everything is important. First, we had KM as a competitive differential. Then we saw the importance in the leadership, in the leader formation, so that they can work with the public companies, public sector, I mean. And now you talked about this, and this is very important also. And then Henrique Muta is going to be on the floor. So he's going to talk about a success case with the National Civil Aviation Agency. And he's going to talk what he did, and maybe he's going to be an incentive to other companies and other organizations. The floor is yours, Henrique. Henrique.
Nós tivemos pequeno problema com o Henrique.
We had a technical problem with Henrique. Then the public is are asking questions, and Marcio and Janaina, please, you can talk, and then we can go back to Henrique if he can come back. Hello, everyone. I liked everyone's presentation. Despite me being retired, it's very good to see many new things. Rossana talked about competitiveness in the public service. And this is something that people never thought about because there wasn't any profit, so no one discussed the competitiveness. New leadership that Professor Luciano talked about, and Professor João, who wrapped up with the need to know public policies. There is a question from the audience. Cristiele from Santa Catarina. I would like to congratulate Luciano for his explanation. I would like to know his opinion on his leadership topics. How can they be integrated in the public administration? Perfect, Cristiele. Thank you for your question. In fact, today, there's a whole inventive, innovative movement where people are thinking how to implement specific practices that can humanize leadership in all society segments. Yes, we need to think ways to do it in the public administration, which is very unique. I know that discontinuity, for example, is a big problem. By hearing Professor João Neves, we saw how lack of prepare of managers affects the whole organization. When we study human history, we see that innovations happened in a problematic circumstance. We cannot wait an easy transition, and we should expect it happens, because there's pressure to consider the human factor. But this is not only what people wish, it's much more complex in it. In many aspects, there aren't any talents. There are lots of serious matters in public health, talking about the workplace. I showed some numbers, but I'm going to say more now. Brazil is the second highest number of burnout cases. This distancing from people and other people get isolated, and it makes people stop producing. And because of burnout, people have to be distant from work for a long time. And this is serious damage for the person and for the government. It's super high. We have to make this change because of these pressures. Brazil is in second. First one is Japan. United States and China are under Brazil, behind Brazil. And an institution that researches the distressing conditions in the workplace. And we need to understand this demand. We need to have tools to deal with this. I can say that many institutions are working in this new format. My company works on this. We have courses to humanize the leadership. For example, neuroscience, management, which are focused in performance, which they have to compare with the other one. If they don't deliver, they are threatened. Their status quo in the organization is threatened. This is a problem. It's not going to help the employee. This started in the 20th century, but now in the 21st, people perceive that we have to start talking, discussing about these topics again. If the leaders are humanized, the whole workplace is going to work better. Threats are not going to help anyone. But this conversation has to be a purpose. We need to learn how to talk productively with everyone. And then these extremely humanized tools, compassionate dialogue, non-judging dialogue, mutually learning dialogue. The leader who can do all these things, this person is going to advance. I hope I answered your question. Thank you, Professor. Marcio, Henrique is back. Let's have him talk. Yes, Henrique, you are on. Okay, thank you so much for the invitation. Marcio invited me. SBGC invited me. I'm going to share my presentation. I'm sorry, the internet broke down, but now I'm back. I was invited to present a working experience, and I'm going to show the results in KM. I work at ANAC, National Civil Aviation Agency, since 2009.
Como provocação, né, a gente
As
fez...
a provocation, there are these two questions: why do and why we try to do it, and how to do it, how we try to do it. Before something else, we are a superintendency in ANAC, and there are many interfaces to work with civil aviation. So there are foreign authorities. We cooperate with many countries. We have national partners.
Na certificação do produto
and many people who are interested in being certified. Only to align the information,
atualmente ela atua
navigability, work with individuals, project related, it's the manufacturing operation of aeroplanes. Then this is our organogram. And then on the left, I said the law that delegated some competencies. So we have two general managements, the continued one and the general of aeronautical products. So talking about ANAC, Brazil is among the 4th certification agencies, so our processes are very well structured. So it's a kind of activity
projeto, em média, ele leva
in average, someone interested in participate, it takes about 5 years to be done. So the lack of knowledge is very relevant for this agency's branch. To illustrate our timeline, in 2011, we mapped the critical knowledge. 13 we had technical management knowledge. In 15, we had KM committee. The first activity, which was certification experiences seminar in 16, and in 18, we had knowledge cafes in people management bound to our program, capacitation program. And how did we think in the KM? There are differences between public administration KM and differences between KM and private sector. For example, motivation, target audience, and sponsorship.
Dono da empresa.
As we do not have an owner, company's owner, the owner is the society, so we have to understand how this motivational factor would be managed. In 2012, we knew about IPEA model, KM model, I mean. So we could have a structure of the process based on this model, Dr. Fabio's model, which was in the IPEA agency. So through workshops, we could define how what was the KM process, if it was going to be systemic one, to develop, create, and protect knowledge so that the processes were improved effectively, to get the service quality better, and to contribute for better civil aviation safety levels. No, this is the Dr. Fabio models, where processes are structured with many topics, strategic ones, using the user, citizen.
Nesse cenário, a gente também...
In this scenario, as I said before, we had many contexts to develop some actions related to KM. So we had a committee related to job rotation, lessons learned, storytelling,
de aprendizagem,
learning tracks, practice communities, knowledge dissemination, and mentorship. So to emphasize, the certification engineering seminar is related to dissemination of knowledge. To illustrate, in this general management, we have many profiles, many specialist servant profiles. They need to have lots of requirements, and they are going to discuss the authorities in the civil aviation in the world and the kinds of certifications. So when we are talking about a project certification, there is a specialist which studied,
that discuss about all the systems, electrical systems, protection. So we have several specialties. And all these specialists, they are highly experienced and qualified. They have also capacitation for international levels. And as I've said, it is a very long process, and hardly ever you will be able to replace this professional. So considering this scenario, we should have an annual event, and the objective would be to centralize all the efforts and the knowledge sharing. We have different and specific objectives, for instance, to integrate different areas and fields of knowledge, to make evidence concerns, discussions about new patterns, strengthen principles, announce, reflect, and discuss about engineering and certification. Well, provide information, socialize, and fulfill gaps, and also to update participants about innovation and research. Well, to have an overview of it, as I've said, 2016 was the first event, and we have the event held in September, November. It was a milestone for specialists who participated actively, and every year we have a different subject. For instance, first we had international work group. The second, 2017, tests of certifications. 2018, air accidents. 2019, innovative technologies. And 2020, we will be addressing the validation of foreign aircrafts. And we also have other actions for the aerospace. We have an action here, we have an award, Novanac Safety, which is, it stimulates the culture of innovation, and it's aimed for the external public, and it's an event that is held at the end of the year. And then we have the acknowledgement for companies, organizations, individuals who have an idea, and that we also have a committee. And 2018, we had 18 proposals analyzed. 2019, we had 5 proposals, but 2020 we still don't have, because 2 years ago it was a presidential event. And we also have the safety in focus, which is about webinars. And due to the pandemic, it's now in a virtual environment. But before time, we had regional events, and today it has been structured to be conducted as a webinar. So in 2020, so far we had 4 editions of it. So here you have my contact details.
Muito obrigado, Henrique. Parabéns pela iniciativa.
Thank you, Henrique, for the initiative. It demonstrated that all the public organizations, well, there are particularities. We might not have the systematized knowledge. So now, Marcia and Janaina. So we will have a Q&A also. Janaina, you can feel comfortable.
O microfone. Obrigada, Marcia.
Thank you, Marcia. It's a pleasure to be part of this panel. And Pavanelli, she talked about challenges and the knowledge management within public organizations, and the dissemination of the practices, and the inefficiency of the operational part. Well, as she is very experienced with that, I would like to know whether you are aware of any public organization that has a differential of competitiveness towards these good practices.
Bom, Janaina, agora você me colocou numa saia
Well,
justa.
Janaina, now it's difficult to answer that question. But well, actually, we have more than one organization that operates with the good practices of knowledge. But as a first impression, it comes to my mind Embrapa. Embrapa is a company that operates with a knowledge network. It produces technical knowledge and is an example for other enterprises. However, it's important to say that since the modernization movement that happened in 2010, it was not a legislation reform, but the structure of the part of it. But we also had gains.
Pessoas talvez não imaginem.
But people might think that, well, they might not know how was the pathway to achieve that. And the national justice and the organizations also, and the federal organization and others. So if there are indicators, and many times the answer is that, well, what we do differently considering the private sector, well, any action, any work can be measured, but you need to have parameters. Otherwise, if you don't take into account the current situation and the parameters for the comparison, then you will not be able to have the operational efficiency gains. So in Brapa, we have several bodies, several departments, because the population might not have access to it, as Professor Pavanelli said. They might not have access to it, but the national justice, we have got gains after the modernization process. So it might be one of the sectors of the federal government. You have the state, federal, that might be evolved. Well, we still have a lot of work to do, but I'm very realistic, and I believe that we will be able to achieve very significant results.
Obrigada.
Thank you.
Eu que agradeço.
I thank you.
Uma pessoa.
Well, there is a person called Luis Carlos who would like to congratulate Luciano Alves' presentation. It was brilliant, and also your career in swimming. And a question to Rossana from Roberto Vasconcelos. How do you understand science and technology, knowing that open innovation and a cooperation network, the modus operandi, is even more important for the success of education? Well, unfortunately, all the current investment in science and technology in Brazil, they are very low, because we are an extremely creative country. We have Embraer, we have other companies, other corporates. But, for instance, Boeing assembled 7 years ago a hub for development, research and development, to work with Brazilian talents that would be able to create technology and feed the company. So it is a benchmark. And even the installations of Boeing, they were all assembled. And the concept of the open innovation for myself is essential. And my thesis of PhD was about that. Innovation and a collaborative model. So you make the society in different formats, well, non-governmental organizations, well, we need to suggest solutions for the government. And for me, it's extremely important. But today, well, it's a critic. I'm not taking into particular issues more technically, because what we have today are poor ombudsmen, because you hear what they suggest, and sometimes they suggest what you can do with the current legislation. You just record the information and that's it. But what do we do with this knowledge? What about the science and technology? Is the foundation for you to improve the conditions of work, the conditions of health, and the society itself. So every innovation, well, we need to have a financial result, a social result, a technical result, and so on. But we still have a lot to do. And open innovation in Brazil, both for the private and the public sectors, in order to have the collaboration, well, we still have a lot to do. It's very restricted. Natura uses that. They have programs in which they call specialists and customers from various areas. They participate in brainstorming tables. So, well, there was one citizen who was not a marketer, was not an engineer. He provided an opinion, and then it was essential. And it also impacts on the logistics. Because, for instance, you don't need to use boxes, you can use bags. So, and the cost, it's about cost reduction. The package is sustainable, it's recyclable. So it's a virtual relation, it's totally different. It's a whole cycle. It's very favorable.
Very favorable, only to illustrate. And then there are many other kinds of participation. The way is still long, Marcia. I would like to ask Professor João if in academic scope, is KM effective? Well, the academic scope works with KM, with research, even master's program, PhD program, and then there's the continuity we always have there. But many times this goes in second place. It depends on someone who would like to develop that theme, that subject. And this depends a lot on the researcher in person. It depends on the context this person is and the students they have. We are dependent on the student that is in that program. But we can make this material available on the program platform. We publish the articles. These master programs and PhD programs with applied research, which we are going to develop the research in public administration or private sector, all of this involves KM. Today, from the 12 orientees I have, 10 of them are developing the management of risk, ethics, compliance, anti-corruption. We end up developing specific strategies so that the government can use it, but not only in the government, in the private sector also. This compliance and ethics, it was something that belonged to the private sector, and now there's the need to use it in the public sector. We need the society to be connected with this matter. This is my point of view. Society has to be involved in these matters also. And society is going to have the demands for the student. The student is not alone. It is in connection to what the society demands. Thank you, Professor. Marcia is with you. Henrique, a question for you. Does your organization value the human being regarding the gains that come from KM?
Em algumas unidades lá da...
Well, in some units,
gerências que são bem...
we have some departments that like the KM ideas. In these communities, people are valued according to their participation.
Eu tendo a dizer que sim.
Regarding that matter, I have to say that they are valued. And speaking of which, on the question that Rossana answered about social participation, I have some information. In our aviation agency, there are some experiences that we have performed because we work with safety organizational experiences. And there are the possibility that society can be a part in this document process. Oh, thank you, Henrique. Okay. I would like to ask Professor Luciano, which is very experienced in developing leaders in public organizations. And he knows the challenges of the public administration very well. How can a culture of KN be set considering the human development in these organizations? Thank you, Janaina, for the question. By doing this, I can share the only slide that I didn't present. It's exactly about it, so I'm going to share now.
Aí, olha, a questão da relação de cultura, engajamento e desempenho.
The relationship between culture, engagement, and performance. The vertical axis, you have performance. On the horizontal axis, culture. And the leadership mentality is going to determine how much the potential excellence of each one is going to emerge within the organization. If we think in the human being, this is how Aristotle used to think, the human being who search knowledge. What is culture? It's the search for knowledge. So when we enable the individual to bring their knowledge freely in a non-threatening environment, this organization is going to be limitless. Its potential will be in a continuum of improvement. But this is something critical. It's the consciousness level. On a leadership that is on a conscious level, which is too defensive, the leader tries to control it. This is the leader's worldview. This leader, by trying to control people, to do things on a certain budget, or sometimes on the leader's point of view, on the leader's benefit. This kind of leadership that still exists, not only in public administration, but talking about a broad way, it's everywhere. There is another conscious level regarding leadership. They do not control, but they would like to coordinate. They would like to have some personal objectives set. There wasn't a cultural overturn, and they have to transform, to adapt with the maturity of each person in this set. And this is essential for today. Robert Keegan made a reference. He was a Harvard professor for 40 years, and who could show with a field research that leaders that would like to fulfill, to reach, control and coordinate, they cannot deal with the complexity of today's world. Especially on the end of 20th century and now, there's the need for the leader to understand the human, and this is so different than in the past. We need to have a more mature leader. Look at the other conscious level. People have to innovate to reach a common sense in the organization. There was a flip. Leader is in the basis of the organization. He is the facilitator of a process where the individuals, this person is the leader. This one will have to be developed. And this new point of view is not something that everyone is doing. So the last level, which is to make a difference, is what we would like the most nowadays, with a humanized leadership, with the empowering leader, the one that really wants to allow and to have formats where people can talk to each other and collectively as well. So there are many interesting cases that can provide a reference in this kind of leadership that makes a difference. Some Silicon Valley cases on Google, which Google conducted in more than 2 years, ended up being the Aristotle project. These highest performance leaders, they empower their teams. Everyone in the team have a voice. They can say what they think without being threatened in the environment. And there is another important component, which is the maturity, empathic capacity of all the stakeholders. When these individuals can be adjusting this model to say what they think, to have new knowledge, new information, and they can be open, then you have a team that is going to have exponential knowledge. So this leader can be one of the members to create knowledge, but he's there to allow people to reach their highest potential. I hope I could share contributions to the answer. And thank you for the opportunity so that I could finish my presentation. Thank you, Luciano. It was an honor. Marcio, do we have time for any questions or the time's up? So time's up, unfortunately. So if there are any questions, we can address the questions later on, and we will share them. I would like to thank SBGC, Fukunaga, Mariana, Renata. I would like to thank Uninove, which are being very collaborative in these pandemics. Providing this structure was very good. All the moderators, they are part of the history of my life. Professor Luciano was my master. I am very grateful for the inspiration he provided and he facilitated. And Marcia, Rossana, Janaina, who offered me many things. Henrique, which I knew in the practice communities. and my latest relationship with which is Professor João Neves. Thank you all, and you all have a nice day.